Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest editions of our Icons of Sports Entertainment. We're a documentary where we look at classical, renowned wrestlers who have made their impact throughout the decades in the wrestling industry, from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s and so on. And we've so far this series, we've spoken to an awful lot of high caliber guests, and that trend continues there tonight. And I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only Al Snow. Al has his fingers in all elements of the wrestling industry, from being a renowned wrestler to being a coach to being a trainer to being a producer. So he's been in all, to be an owner as well. So he's been in all facets of the industry. But Al, I just got to go back to you back in the 70s, growing up. First of all, did you come from well-off beginnings as a child growing up? And what were your main sort of pastimes with brothers or sisters? What did you like to, were you basketball or football, American football orientated family, or were you watching wrestling from a young age even?
Well, I grew up in a working class family, and I was a wrestling fan from, when I was very young. And then as years went on, I made the decision that I wanted to be a professional wrestler when I was 14 years old, and started pursuing it from that moment on. Granted, it was very difficult back in that time. It was a lot more closed secular business for wrestling, and it was not that simple to become a professional wrestler, especially when you were a kid and you're trying to do it. Got turned down a lot, laughed at, but kept at it. And finally, found somebody who was willing to take me on as an apprentice, so to speak, be responsible for me, train me, bring me into professional wrestling. And had my first match May 22nd of 1982. And been doing it ever since.
And Al, in terms of your parents, obviously you mentioned 14. Did they want you to pursue academics? Were you good at school in terms of, was there a possibility of you did you go to third level college or university, or did you really pursue it from 14, 15 and put everything into it?
I put everything into it. There was no plan B. From that moment that I made that decision, I pursued it voraciously, and I graduated from high school or secondary school and went directly into becoming a professional wrestler and making a living, or attempting to make a living as a professional wrestler.
Yeah, and I imagine, Al, trying out, I know you went to a wrestling camp tryout in 1982 with the Lancasters, and you met the promoter, Jim Lancaster, there as well. But I imagine, in terms of trying to make a living at that time, I suppose starting out, the money probably wasn't the greatest. Was it very much hard to survive? Were you doing 2 or 3 jobs outside of that in terms of trying to make a living?
No, I've just been a professional wrestler, and it was very difficult to make a living because this isn't a job. I know you all like to believe it is, and I know you all like to believe and tell each other that you're entitled to get paid for whatever you do, but you're not. That's not how entertainment works. Entertainment is you're paid directly in relationship to how much of an audience will pay to see you perform. And if the answer to that is 0, then that's what you're worth. And of course, starting out in my career, on posters and other forms of advertisement, my name wasn't even featured. I was just plus one other match or other exciting bouts or additional all-stars. So as such, I wasn't a factor in how many people showed up at the building. So I got the last little bit of what was left of the gate every night, which sometimes wasn't much, if any.
Yeah. And Al, in 1993, you wrestled as under the name Steve Moore against The Undertaker, and that was your first experience in the WWE. And can you remember trying to leave some sort of mark, or was there anything said to you that gave you the hope and belief that you would come back there and revisit the WWE in future years? Or did you feel at that time when you left after 1993 that was maybe an opportunity, maybe closed?
Well, I never thought it was closed, you know, because you never know what possibilities. And whenever you show up and you're physically there, that's what really opens the door. And sometimes those opportunities don't manifest themselves, you know, for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years later. You know, that's just how it works. So I never felt it was closed, but I didn't feel like it was going to open up into me doing anything full time with WWF at that time, you know, right that moment. Because I kind of went up and did the TV tapings for the 3 days, and then that was it. It came to an end.
And Al, in 1995, you set up your own professional wrestling school with D'Lo Brown Body Slammers. And I suppose you're roughly 10 years in terms of the wrestling sort of industry. Were you trying to move maybe in towards setting up wrestling camps, passing on sort of tips for you? Was that another side of venture that you were keeping open?
I'd started the wrestling school in around 1990. I didn't start it with D'Lo. I brought D'Lo came in and I helped finish and polish D'Lo up at the school. Okay. And it was very successful. Went on to, you know, D'Lo would be one of the kids that I was responsible for, Blue Meanie, Dan Severin, Truth Martini in Ring of Honor. There were a lot of guys that went on to become, you know, pretty successful in professional wrestling, have good careers. And it was a great experience, and you know, I really enjoyed doing it. But I towards the end of the 90s, I sold the wrestling school because my obligations to WWE at that time were just too much for me to allow me to run the school full time and keep my obligations and my responsibilities to WWE at the same time.
And Al, I know you were a short stint in ECW in 1995, but do you feel really things really took off for you that year in 1995 at Smoky Mountain Wrestling with Jim Cornette, and the tag team partnership that you had with Glenn Jacobs at the time was playing the Unibomb? It seemed to be after that 1995, things really started to climb the ladder very, very fast in the career of Al Snow.
Yeah, I mean, it was a, you know, good year because it opened up a lot of doors and gave me a lot of opportunities, and is what got my foot in the door initially with WWF at that time. And, you know, I'm forever grateful to Jim Cornette and because of that run in Smoky Mountain, and to Paul Heyman, you know, with the run that I had in ECW, you know, it was even that short run there was starting to open up doors and get recognition and acknowledgement, and I was no longer the best kept secret in wrestling anymore. So,
and Al, you mentioned that was a title that was sort of dubbed floating around in terms of Al Snow, the best kept sort of secret in professional wrestling. Was that sort of annoying or irritating when you hear comments like that, or?
Not at all. It was very flattering.
Okay.
I wanted someone to tell the secret and to start to get the word out. Yeah, you know. But everything takes its natural course, and you know, I have no complaints and I have no regrets. Everything happened the way it did for the reasons it did, and I have had a very, very lengthy and a very successful career for 39 years. So.
And one thing, Al, that I've noticed so far from doing this documentary is I've spoken to likes of Devin Hughes as well, and even like Scott Levy, who the character everyone knows him from Raven. One thing they all seem to the similarity is finding their character in ECW and finding their character under the influence of some way. Paul Heyman, his business acumen or his mind for the business had some sort of role to play in that sort of breakthrough of that character. Around that time as well, Al, your character came to the fore, I suppose, with the Head and the Mannequin and ECW at the time. Did Al play a bit of role in that in terms of discovering that character, or was that all your own creation?
It was all totally 100% my own.
Okay.
Even at some points, you know, Paul would jokingly and not so jokingly say he hated my manager, that he didn't like it, but he acknowledged it and gave me the creative freedom to keep doing it. And it worked, you know, connected with the audience, and that is without a question or a doubt is the most valuable skill that a entertainer, no matter whether they're a professional wrestler or anything, can do, is develop a persona that fans can turn to their friends and family and describe you in a sentence or less. That's what really makes someone stand out and makes someone a star, is that ability to encapsulate who they are, what they stand for, and what to expect when you go watch them perform in a sentence or less, A, B, C, D, E.
And Al, you mentioned a point there, and it's so prominent there, and in terms of our viewers, this sort of theatrical sort of aspect in terms of the character, to be able to put on a show in terms of that sort of a one-man sort of piece in terms of pitching that content. And I just look at probably down through here someone like Shelton Benjamin, amazingly gifted athlete, but probably in terms of you judging him on sheer athleticism alone, you probably give him the world heavyweight title, but in terms of that, is that sort of package in terms of those sort of acting sort of ability, that theatre you mentioned there about discovering that for yourself, is that really that separates the good wrestlers from the great wrestlers?
Well, first, it's not acting. Wrestlers aren't actors. That the closest that you might consider them to be an actor would be like a method actor, but they're not an actor. Who they really are is what you see in the ring. They just take that aspect and turn it up really loud. Steve Austin is Steve Austin. Vince McMahon is Vince McMahon, but they just take that part of their personality and really crank it up. It's no different than you walking into a room and trying to take command of the room without verbally saying something. You project your energy, you project your personality, and now you're doing that in a room of 20,000 people, and you're doing it on TV where millions of people at home can feel and connect to that. Because if it's an act, if it's a character, like you all like to call, then it doesn't work, and it's not real. I've said this numerous times lately, and that's the closest thing to performance-wise to professional wrestling is like stand-up comedy. And your favorite stand-up comedians, the reason they're successful is because they're real, they're honest when they're up on stage. You can sense, you can feel that they're not selling you an act. And the same goes with professional wrestlers. It's integral that an audience has to believe in who the wrestler is, because they can't relate to what we do. Football, basketball, and baseball in America have enormous audiences. And the reason they do is because everybody's played them as a kid. They're not as big in England or in Ireland or, around the rest of the world, because you guys don't play those sports. But soccer is enormous around the rest of the world, more so than it is here in the United States, because more people play soccer. Cricket is enormous in the rest of the world. Why? Well, because people play cricket there. You relate physically to what's happening on the screen. In professional wrestling, you've never hit the ropes. You've never taken a bump. You don't know what those things feel like. You can't relate to them, but you can relate to who the wrestler is and why they're doing it in the context of a competitive situation. And that's why it's so integral to develop that persona for a wrestler, so that then the audience can connect and relate to that wrestler and understand who they are. Either they know somebody just like them, or they know somebody that's similar, and they like them because of that, or they don't like them because of that.
And Al, you mentioned being back in the WWF at 1998, 2008, even further sort of stints. A long period in was to come in your time in WWE, numerous hardcore championship runs. It was all the Attitude Era. But I just want to ask you, in terms, what was it like being a wrestler in the locker room that time around the whole Evasion storyline, where there was ECW was coming, WCW was coming, the WSRF, there was so many wrestlers all trying to get so much limelight in terms of time, in terms of the ring.
That's always the case. It is such an incredibly competitive life that you have to live, and the pressure and the stress is immense. And a lot of young performers romanticize the idea of going to WWE, and they don't realize that You know, they have to basically live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, playing poker or chess every single day, 365 days a year. And you're only as good as the last time you performed. So imagine you've got to perform in the World Cup of Soccer, and you've got to be a factor in your team winning every single time you're on the field. And if at any point in time you don't produce, your name will come up around the table. And if it doesn't make it around the table that week, you get gone.
You get gone. Wow.
So are you willing to live with that pressure, knowing that all of the people that are in the locker room with you are also competing for the very thing you have? This week on TV, you had 30 seconds of television time, and there are at least 20 or 30 guys in the back that feel like you didn't deserve that, and they did. Yeah. And they're going to do whatever they can to get that 30 seconds next week away from you. Yeah. But you better be able to produce and do whatever it takes to keep that 30 seconds, or you won't get it again.
And Al, looking at you now, you seem in great physical health in terms of appearance. And I'm just sort of wondering, we've seen with so many wrestlers throughout the year, the rigors in the ring has left their sort of toll in terms of injuries, in terms of effects, in terms of concussion. Do you feel maybe that you escaped all those sort of repercussions, or?
No, I wish. Just last October, I had both of my knees replaced. Okay. They were I completely had them reconstructed with titanium. You know, I have issues that I deal with memory-wise and other things with, you know, because of concussions, and I have other injuries, you know, from where I broke my neck twice. You know, I can't move my head very well, and so, you know, there's a price to pay, and you know, it is just part and parcel of what we do.
And looking at the content now in terms of what All Elite Wrestling, in terms of the WWE, are you still a fan, or are you more of a fan of the time in terms of the 90s and 2000 when you were wrestling? Did you sort of relate to it now? Can you still sort of relate to the same sort of product?
I've always been, and I always will be, a fan of professional wrestling. I'm very blessed to have gotten to do what I've loved to do for as long as I've gotten to do it. And that'll never change. Professional wrestling, the product, has never changed. I know that everyone likes to believe, and that's the new mantra, that now somehow we're selling something different than what we sold back in 1920, as opposed to now in 2021. And nothing could be further from the truth, because in 1920, the only thing that they were selling was who the wrestler was and why he was getting in the ring. Was he going to dare? Was he going to win? Was he going to lose? And guess what we're still selling today?
Yeah,
who the wrestler is and why they're in the ring. Too bad that so many people like to believe that it's changed so they can justify that they're now selling what is done, not who and why.
And Al, I just got one or two last sort of questions for you. I know I'm taking up your valuable time. Al, in terms of Tough Enough, in terms of that sort of competition, nationwide sort of competition, when the directors and producers came to you and said you were getting involved as a coach and you were taking these complete sort, anyone could walk through the door in terms of all different sorts of lives, were you a bit sort of skeptical at sort of first? Were you like, well, I'm hoping they could be from some sort of a background or athletic background? Or was it very much like America's Got Talent, where you were just in a room and you were just waiting to see who'd walk in the door in terms of trying out for a wrestler?
It was kind of the latter, waiting just to see who was going to come through the door. But I don't judge people on anything but one simple, important thing, and that is passion. You could have all the talent, have all the tools, the height, the look, the charisma, speaking ability, muscularity, athletic ability, you name it. You could have it all. So you don't have the passion, you won't do anything. You won't survive. You'll quit. It won't be for you. And if you know, and I've seen people that don't have a single tool, nothing. And they walk in the door and you can tell that this is what they want to do, and they have a passion and a drive to do it. They go on to become, you know, successful. They go on to have a career and to be a positive addition to the sport of professional wrestling. And that's how I've always judged, you know, who potentially is going to make it and who's not.
And do you start to look at the industry differently now as a promoter in terms of working now with Ohio Valley Wrestling during your time in TNA and maybe as a director behind the sort of scenes? Do you sort of look at it in terms of that sort of creating from that hour-long show and how it runs in sequences, or do you still value that sort of person-to-person interaction with the wrestler in terms of knowing what you've been through that or going through? Do you like to still interact, or do you see it more as an overall sort of piece now?
Well, I think the one thing that's changed is it gives me a far better insight and understanding where I made my mistakes in the ring during my career, and being able to see it from the other side of the fence and understanding that what it is that I'm in, why, and where the focus really needed to be and where it wasn't. And then where I missed opportunities that I could have become much more of an attraction and had a much greater career if I'd simply focused on the right things while out there taking advantage of that incredible opportunity of being in the ring in front of an audience on that kind of a platform. And that's allowed me to help to communicate that to the younger talent in hopes of helping them avoid the very mistakes and pitfalls that I made in my own career.
And Al, second last question for you now. Have you any memories of your time spent in Ireland and wrestling in Ireland, and maybe going around maybe the cities, Dublin or Belfast, and any sort of quick sort of story for us?
Ireland is a beautiful country, and in Belfast, you know, I got to work with a wonderful group of wrestlers there. I think it was, gosh, I can't remember the name of the company, but they were all awesome, and I loved the fans were, you know, it wasn't a big crowd, but a very energetic and very vocal and emotional crowd. And you know, I had the opportunity to go to Dublin and then go into Belfast and out in the countryside and just, you know, beautiful country, gorgeous country and wonderful people. And maybe hopefully one of these days I'll get to come back and make another trip there.
And I suppose lastly, Al, an icon of the sports entertainment industry spanning over multiple decades. And final question for you, Al Snow. If it was offered you again and someone said, we'll give you a college career or do it all over again, would you do it all over again?
Absolutely would do it all over again, 100%. I've been doing this now for 39 years and I've never once had a single regret for doing it. Have I made mistakes? Has life been hard? Has it been a challenge? Absolutely. But I've actually gotten to live a life as opposed to just simply being alive. And that's a big difference, you know, and I'm very grateful that I've gotten to do something that I've enjoyed and loved doing for so long. And I just hope that I can continue to do it that much longer.
On that note, Al Snow, a pleasure joining us for the latest series of the Icons of Sports Entertainment Industry. Thanks for telling us your story, starting off back in 1982 and even beyond that as a 14-year-old boy, still going strong and still with that enthusiasm and passion as that 14-year-old boy. You can still see that sort of child in you when we talk about wrestling. The passion that you have for it, even to this day, just beams off your face. Al Snow, an absolute pleasure. Stay safe to you and all your loved ones, and we look forward to seeing you sometime in Ireland again in the near future.
The same very much to you as well, my friend.
Cheers. Take care, Al.
Take care.